I met the beekeeper on the line between Veszprém and Topolka on a warm summer evening when the light still hung gold-orange over the fields and Lake Balaton shimmered like mercury when you saw it through the window. He wore a light cotton shirt, and his skin was brown and deeply lined like the earth after a long summer. And everywhere on him, in the pockets, in the folds of his clothes, was the scent of honey, not like sugar, but like sunshine you could smell, like blossoms transformed into nectar. That fragrance was so strong that I understood at once this man wasn't simply a seller. He was a beekeeper, head to toe. The man doesn't simply sit there. He has several small baskets with him, and from these baskets radiates a kind of warmth. Not the warmth of fire, but the inner warmth of life, of many small creatures that together are warmer than alone. And I soon understood these were containers holding, not bees that would have been dangerous on a train, but honey, pure, liquid honey from the summer that he'd harvested from the hive only that morning. He saw me looking, and a broad smile burst across his face. Immediately he began to speak, not like someone who has time and patience, but like someone so full of something that words simply have to flow out, like honey from a warm jar. He told me he'd been a beekeeper for 48 years, that his father had been a beekeeper, and his grandfather's father, and at some point, there was an ancestor who kept the first bee. And since then, the life of his family had been inseparably linked with these creatures. They weren't simply insects to him, but partners, family, teachers. And the bees, he said, and here his voice grew quieter, warmer, more thoughtful. The bees are the best teachers you can have. They show you how to truly work together without words, without commands, without force. In a beehive, there are no egoists. Every bee does what's good for the colony, and this isn't sacrifice, but harmony. And what's good for the colony is in the end best for every individual bee. That's a different mathematics than the one we humans normally understand. Normally, we think, if I take everything for myself, I'll be happiest. But the bees know better. They've long since learned this truth. He opened one of the baskets and showed me a jar of honey. It was warm in my hands, warm like a living creature, and the color was dark gold, almost red in some places, like the sky at sunset, and it gleamed as if it had an inner light, as if the sun itself had become trapped in this jar. He said this honey came from wildflowers, from blossoms growing in the forests around Lake Balaton, flowers that no farmer planted, but that nature itself placed there. Bees fly everywhere, into lands people don't know, into forests humans haven't explored, and they gather nectar from flowers few people have ever seen. And from this nectar, these hidden treasures of nature, they make gold, pure golden honey, the greatest wonder of the animal world. He then told me about his life, which I could picture completely. Every morning, before sunrise, before the world is awake, he goes to his hives. He watches how they're doing. He listens to their humming, to the tone they make, to the song they sing. For yes, that's a song. When the humming sounds happy, then all is well, then the world is in order. When it sounds sick, thin, and tense, then he knows something is wrong, and he has to act, and it will frighten him, because he loves these creatures. He's learned to understand the bees the way you understand someone you've lived with your whole life, your spouse, your child, your own breath. He knows what they need. He knows how they think. He knows them better than he knows himself. And the work is hard. The beekeeper grows old with this work. His back is bent from bending, from lifting, from carrying heavy boxes of honey. His hands are stung by bees, not from malice, but from carelessness, he says, or perhaps from love, from defending the colony. And the summers are long and hot, and there are years when the harvest is poor, when the bees can't collect enough because the summer was too dry or too wet, or a predatory insect came and decimated the stocks. But every year, says this old man, I continue, because I don't know how to stop. He offered me a spoonful of honey. Extravagantly much, I thought at first. But then I understood this wasn't generosity. This was the way this man lives, the way he thinks, the way he sees the world. Nothing in tiny morsels, everything in large, generous portions, the way nature itself gives. And the honey on my tongue was, I can't describe it. It was too much all at once. It was sweet, yes, but it was also complex, like good music that has many layers that you only hear on the second and third listening, that you carry into dreams. It was the forest blossoms. It was millions of bees at their work. It was the patience of the beekeeper over nearly 50 years. It was the wisdom of generations, all together in this sweet, gleaming substance, the greatest gift nature could give. And then he said he'll be retiring soon. His hands can't work as well as they used to. His fingers are stiff from arthritis, but they still remember the movements. His eyes have grown weaker, and he no longer sees all the illnesses that afflict the bees. But one of his sons will take over the beekeeping. It's not the life the son would have chosen, said the old man with a sideways glance that shows he's proud. The son wanted to study computers, work in a city, in an office, with machines instead of nature. But in recent years, as the son helped his father more often with the work, as summer after summer passed, he began to understand the bees, began to see that this isn't an old trade, but a timeless one, that it requires knowledge no computer can replace, that it requires a heart. The train moves slower now, approaching Topolka station, and the old beekeeper packs his baskets again, and with each piece of luggage seems to go a piece of the summer into these bags. The scent of honey and summer still fills the small compartment, fills my clothes, fills my thoughts, will stay with me for many days. And I see how the old man stands, takes his luggage, and looks out the window at the lakes and fields, at the home he loves. And I see that he's smiling, and this smile isn't tired, though his body must be tired, from the long years of work, from the 1,000 small stinging wounds. It's the smile of someone who's spent his whole life doing something that mattered, that had meaning, that changed the world, even if no one sees it. And my eyes close, and I still taste the honey, and I still smell those blossoms and that sun, and the train soothes me with its rhythm, clack, 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 clack. And I think of millions of bees working, loving their colony, and of an old man who spent his whole life with them, and of honey that's golden and sweet and carries the whole world within it, slowly, warmly, falling asleep. A girl sits across from me on the line between Zakopane and Krakow, and the first thing I notice about her isn't her face, but her scarf. It's a thick, hand-knitted scarf in colors that shouldn't work together, a kind of dark blue, then a strip of cream, then dark blue again. But it works, you understand, it works perfectly. The scarf is so old that the colors have faded, and it looks as though it's already made 100 journeys, and now it's making another. You can see it's been worn, that it's lived, that the wool is soft from the hand of time. It's winter outside. The mountains around Zakopane are snow white, and breath freezes on the windows. But the girl isn't wearing the scarf because it's cold. The train is warm, and the scarf could go unworn. But the girl wears it anyway. She wraps it tightly around her neck, as if she's embracing herself, as if she's giving herself courage. The girl is young, early 20s I'd say, and she wears this scarf as if it's treasure. She's wrapped it around her neck and it falls over her shoulders to her lap. Sometimes she pulls one end of the scarf over her face, not from cold, the train is warm, but from a kind of shyness. Her hair is dark brown and it falls over her eyes when she looks down. She's not reading, she's not looking out the window. She's simply sitting with this scarf, as though she's waiting for something, or perhaps as though she's saying goodbye to something. At some point, she begins to stroke the scarf, her fingers tracing the texture of the knit, and I see her lips move very slightly, as if she's saying something or singing to herself, but very, very quietly. I try not to stare, but you become curious, you see, when you sit on trains for long periods. You observe these small details, and they tell the whole story. And I soon understood that this scarf wasn't just a scarf, it was a story she carried with her. It was a letter written in wool instead of words. The movement of the train is quiet and hypnotic. Clack, 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 clack. And the girl sways gently in this rhythm. Sometimes she pulls one end of the scarf over her face, not from cold, the train is warm, but from a kind of shyness, or perhaps from sorrow. I can't quite tell. Her hair is dark brown, and it falls over her eyes when she looks down. She's not reading, she's not looking out the window. She's simply sitting with this scarf, as though she's waiting for something, or perhaps as though she's saying goodbye to something. After an hour, or perhaps 2, time flows differently on trains. She looked up and saw that I'd been watching her, not angrily, but gently, with the patience of someone who knows old secrets. And she smiled, not much, just a small smile, and said, "My grandmother knitted this for me before she died. She couldn't see anymore, but she knitted, and I told her which color should come next, and she knitted until it was finished. That was 5 years ago. The scarf," she said, "was too precious to wear, too precious to ruin. So it lay in a box in a room, and she'd look at it sometimes, but she didn't wear it. But today," she said, "I'm traveling to visit my great-grandmother, my grandmother's mother, to see her one last time before she dies. She's 91 years old, and I thought, it's time to wear this scarf. It's time to use it, not hoard it. That's what my grandmother would have wanted me to do." And she showed me then how careful the stitches were. Despite everything, even though the old woman couldn't see, the stitches were small and even and perfect, even when you looked very closely. And the girl said that her grandmother had taught her everything about patience and love, not with words, but with the movements of her hands. When you knit a scarf, you can't think, you just have to do. The hands know what to do, and the mind grows quiet, and suddenly you've created something without really knowing how it happened. The grandmother did this with her eyes closed, and the scarf turned out perfect anyway, because love can replace eyes. She spoke quietly and thoughtfully, and I listened, and I saw that this scarf wasn't just a piece of clothing. It was the entire relationship between a grandmother and a girl. It was all the time they'd spent together, all the stories that had been told, all the moments of happiness and being understood. And now the girl wore it, and in doing so, she carried her grandmother's love with her, everywhere. Everywhere. She told me about her great-grandmother, the old woman she was going to visit. This woman had been a queen in her family, the girl said, not because she was rich, but because she was wise. She'd been a midwife before she retired, and she'd brought hundreds of babies into the world, babies who were now grandparents, babies who'd grown up and had children of their own and had grandchildren. The great-grandmother was the root of an enormous tree of people, all because she'd been there to support their arrival. And everyone she delivered had received her time, her patience, her full attention. That's what midwives did in those days. They weren't merely technical assistants. They were witnesses to the most important moments of a human life. And the girl said that this great-grandmother wanted all her great-great-grandchildren and great-great-grandsons to come say goodbye. And the girl was one of many, but she wanted to do something special. She wanted to wear something beautiful on the day she visited her great-grandmother, something that would show she was grateful, that this old woman had been a witness to her family, that she wanted to carry forward the chain of lives this great-grandmother had begun. And when I heard that, I suddenly understood why the scarf didn't look wrong on the girl, why there wasn't a flaw. There was no flaw, because hand-knitted things are never flawed. Every stitch is exactly right because it was made with love, with attention, with thoughts of the person who would wear it. That's the difference between handwork and machine work. In handwork sits the human soul. And in this scarf sat the soul of a grandmother who couldn't see, but who could see through her hands, through her love. The girl understood this, and that's why she wore the scarf like a precious stone, like a part of herself. The train travels through the snow-covered mountains of the Tatras, and the girl with the scarf still sits beside me, and I see how she closes her eyes, and I see how the movement of the train carries her slowly, slowly, toward dreams. The rhythm of the wheels grows quieter, or perhaps I simply can't hear it anymore because my eyes are closing too, and the scarf lies warm around her shoulders, the love of a dead grandmother, the love of an aging great-grandmother, all together in this thin, frayed, precious, knitted wool. In this way, the generations travel together on a train through the mountains. And my eyes close too. And I think of all the scarves that have been knitted, all the hands that worked, all the grandmothers and grandfathers of this world who wove their time into fabrics. And the train travels on into the mountains, slowly, warmly, and the scarf is still there, and the love is still there, and the girl sleeps. The scent comes suddenly through the open window as the train pulls into a small station. It must be Arada, the line between Arada and Arad, and the fragrance is so strong, so complete, that for a moment I don't know if I'm still sitting on the train or whether I'm in another time, another life. It smells of cooked fruit, of sugar, of apricots becoming jam, and it also smells of my mother. And with this scent, I return. I'm 8 years old again, and it's autumn, and my mother stands in the kitchen making jam. The window is open, and cold wind comes in, but the kitchen is warm from the work, warm from the great pot on the stove, where the fruit simmers and transforms into something new. The fruits, plums, apricots, sometimes wild berries my father brought from the forest, swim in sugar and lemon juice, and my mother stirs them slowly with a large wooden spoon, and the fragrance fills not just the kitchen but the whole house, perhaps even the whole street. My mother is young in this memory, younger than I am now, and her hands are constantly busy. One hand stirs the bubbling mass in a large copper pot she inherited from her mother. The other removes with a flat spoon the pink foam from the surface, the foam that later, if I'm good, she gives to me to eat, still warm, still sticky. She works quietly, concentrately, as if she's not cooking jam but creating something sacred, a substance that preserves time. And I sit at the table and watch her. I'd much rather go to her and help, but I can't get too close to the hot pot, so I sit there and watch, and I hear her sing very softly as she works. The song makes the work feel lighter. The song she sings. I still remember the melody, though the words have faded into the years. Isn't cheerful and isn't sad. It's simply there, like part of the work, like the stirring spoon, like the fire, like the pot itself. It's as if with the song she's also transforming the fruit, as if the music makes the sugar a little softer, the fruit a little sweeter, the whole kitchen a little warmer. And I'm enchanted by this moment, completely hypnotized by this woman, my mother, who knows how to turn fruit into jam, how to preserve time, the summer, so you can eat it in winter, so the good things don't disappear. She's a sorceress, I think then. She can turn red fruit into gold. Later, when the jam grows thick enough, and I quickly learn to recognize this consistency, when it's ready, you don't need much experience, just attention. My mother fills it into jars. She'd sterilized the jars beforehand, heated them in the oven long before I was born, so they wouldn't break when the hot jam goes in, because the jars too are nervous of heat. And when the jam flows into the jars, it gleams like jewels, like little red and golden treasures you're allowed to take into winter. The warm light from the lamp above the kitchen refracts in the red and orange mass, dances in it, and the jars look like little windows into another summer, another world, a time of safety and love. My mother then seals the jars with white metal lids and rubberized paper, which she carefully screws onto the warm jars, twists until they're firm, but not so firm you can't open them. And when the jam cools, and we must be patient, very patient, it might take hours, it makes a clicking sound. Click. One after the other, the jars speak to us. They say everything is fine, that the vacuum has been created, that the jam is now safe, that it can last months, perhaps years, perhaps decades. And this clicking sound is the sound of time being preserved, the sound of safety, of foresight, of a mother's love that wants to say, I'm taking care of you. I'll make sure you have something sweet to eat in winter, that you can remember the summer, that you'll never go hungry, that you'll never be alone. And I think, sitting at the table watching the jars, as the jam hardens and the color slowly grows a little darker, from red to a deeper red, to a color almost black as night, that this is what mothers do, their secret work that never ends, that they do without anyone seeing, without receiving praise. They take the good things of life, the fruit, the sun, the summer, the moments of bliss, the fleeting seconds, and they preserve them so we have them later, so we don't forget there are good things, that life is beautiful, that the world is worth living in, even when it grows hard. They transform the temporary into the eternal. They take a few weeks of summer and make from it memories that can last a whole lifetime, that carry the sun through long, cold winters, through war and loss, through all the difficulties of aging. And in later years, long after my mother died, long after I myself grew old, I see such jam in a shop or at a market, and the price is ridiculously high. A tiny jar for a fortune, more than I pay for a shirt. And I don't understand why, until I think that what can't be paid for isn't the sugar and the fruit. It's the time bound into it. It's the hand of a mother stirring. It's a song sung while the fruit cooks. It's love packaged in glass. You can't buy that. You can only receive it if someone loves you, if someone sits for hours in the warm kitchen and cooks, only for you, only so you have something sweet in winter, so you're not alone. The train starts again, slowly leaving the station, and the scent gradually fades. But it's still there, still in the air of the compartment, still in my clothes, still in my thoughts, still in my heart. And I still see my mother before me, see her hands stirring, the wooden spoon moving through the bubbling mass, hear her song flowing through the warm kitchen like honey, like the jam itself. Autumn was beautiful then. That was a year when I still had everything. And winter would be beautiful too, because there would be jam, because time would be preserved, because love could be kept in jars, accessible, tangible, there when I needed it. And I lean my head against the window, and the landscape flows past like a dream, like a film you've seen 1,000 times, and I'm back on the train between Oradea and Arad. But I'm also still in that kitchen, in that time, in that moment, in those jars full of jam standing there cooling. And my eyes grow heavy, slowly, ever heavier, and the memory carries me away into deeper waters, into sleep, into the autumn of another time, where my mother still lives and cooks and sings, where time is still slow, where love is still warm in the jars. The polished brass handle of the carriage door, I see it whenever I leave my compartment, has a particular shine to it, a kind of warmth that only old things acquire when they've been touched by countless hands. And suddenly, with my hand upon that handle, I'm not here anymore, not on this train between Paris and Lausanne, but in another train, in another time, a century that people then didn't yet call the Belle Époque, though that's what they'd come to call it. I'm a young man in this memory, 40 years younger perhaps, full of hope and ambition, and I'm traveling in a luxury compartment, a kind of dream made from cloth and wood. This isn't simply a compartment, it's a work of art, a room designed to show that there are people who understand beauty, that the world isn't just trains of iron and steam. The walls are dark wood, walnut perhaps, or oak, decorated with inlays, small pictures made from lighter wood, tiny artworks by craftsmen showing leaves and tendrils, patterns that dance like life itself. The floor is a carpet of soft wool, cream and dark brown, that feels like a dream beneath your feet. The light comes from 2 wall lamps fashioned from crystal, and the bulbs burn with a warm, gentle glow that makes the world kinder. And the seat. Goodness, the seat. It's wider than 2 normal seats put together, upholstered in leather so soft you feel yourself sinking into a cloud. And along the wall above, there's a whole network of brass handles and fittings, all polished, all gleaming in that particular way that only quality possesses. You can grip something no matter how the train lurches. Everything is considered, everything is elegant, everything is perfect. I'm not alone in this compartment. There's another passenger, an older woman, perhaps in her early 60s, with gray hair arranged elegantly, diamonds at her ears, a fur wrap across her shoulders, though the train is warm. She sits across from me and reads a book, but she's not really reading, she's thinking. Now and then she looks out the window, and I see it's raining. I see the landscape sliding past, dark and green and wet. And the woman sees it all, understands it all. She's a widow, I imagine, or a divorced woman. Someone who travels alone because she's learned how, because she's had no other choice, or perhaps because she chooses to. And she travels in this luxury compartment, not necessarily because she's wealthy, perhaps she is, I can't tell, but because she owes herself something. Because she knows life is short and she wants a little beauty, wants to know that the world still makes beautiful things, still creates beautiful places. And at some point, I can't quite remember when, time moves strangely on trains, flows differently there. She begins to speak with me. She asks where I'm headed, and I tell her I'm going to a conference in Lausanne, something to do with business, something unremarkable, something nobody will care about in 20 years. And she smiles, a knowing smile, as if she understands something about business that I don't yet know, as if she's already learned that most of it doesn't matter. And she tells me that Lausanne is beautiful by the lake, that I ought to walk there, not just work, but also live, that the lake is the best medicine for a stressed man's soul, better than any document, better than any conference. She tells me then, slowly, thoughtfully, as if choosing her words carefully, as if she knows I'm listening, that I understand, that she didn't visit the lake for years, that she didn't dare go there for reasons she won't tell me, reasons that are grief or fear or memory, but that she remembers how it felt to see water so vast you can't see where it ends, water that becomes the horizon, that becomes hope. And she says life is the same. Sometimes it's like a great lake and you can't see where it ends, can't see what's on the far shore, but you know it goes on, that it always goes on, like water evaporating and falling again as rain, like a soul renewing itself. The train carries us through the night, and we sit there in this compartment of wood and leather and brass handles that still gleam as if they were lighting themselves with their own reflections. And the woman and I talk about the world, about books, about great philosophers whose names I no longer remember, about love, carefully, not too personally, and yet deeply, as though I know this is a chance I won't get again, and I understand that this is a rare moment, a moment when two people who will never see each other again can speak completely to one another, because there are no consequences, because time is limited, because the journey creates a natural boundary, because the train will arrive eventually, and I'll step out of this compartment and I'll never see this woman again. But I'll always remember this night. When we arrive in Mouzon, and I know we arrive, though I don't remember the route, don't remember the other stations, don't remember how long the journey took, don't remember the landscape that slipped past. The woman says goodbye to me with a formality I didn't fully understand then, a kind of formality that hides genuine sorrow. She gives me her hand, and her hand is cool and dry, and her grip is firm, and I feel that she's giving me something, not just in words, but in this grip, in this touch. And she tells me I should walk by the lake, not because I have business, not because I must work, but because I'm alive, and being alive means seeing beauty. And she tells me too that I should remember that there are still beautiful people in the world, still beautiful things, still beautiful moments, even when life grows difficult, even when the future looks dark, as it looks dark in this year of farewells and uncertainty. And now, decades later, on another train between Paris and Lausanne, the same journey a century later, I touch this brass handle and I'm back in that other compartment, in that other moment, in that other year that was full of fear and great hope together. And I still see the eyes of that woman, still see her elegant sorrow, still see her wisdom, the kind that only comes when you've lost much and dared to go on living, to live beautifully. And I understand now what she wanted to tell me, that life is short, that beauty matters, that you owe something to yourself because you can't know how much time you have left, that you should walk by the lake if you have the chance, that you should touch the brass handles, that you should talk with one another, that you should remember that the world is beautiful. And my eyes grow heavy, and I lean my head back against the soft cushion. Not as soft as it was then, but soft enough. And I hear the rhythm of the train, and I'm in 2 times at once, in 2 trains, in 2 lives. And the woman still sits across from me, and we're still talking, and the train goes on, slowly, warmly, endlessly. It's a bouquet of flowers that I suddenly see in a shop window of a small flower shop as we pull into a station between Amsterdam and Haarlem. And the air is full of those green, damp Dutch smells, of water, of leaves, of wet earth. And this bouquet, no, it's not simply a bouquet, not simply something to buy and give away. This bouquet is a portal, a door, a way into another life, another moment, another time. And suddenly I'm not old anymore, not alone on the train, but young again, back in Amsterdam, back to being someone who believed life was endless. I'm young again, perhaps 25, and I'm standing in a flower market in Amsterdam, and everything is color, an explosion of color, and I'm overwhelmed. It's spring, early spring, just after the snow is melted, just after winter's darkness begins to lift, and the traders are bringing their flowers out from the greenhouses, from the hothouses where the blooms have been waiting. Tulips, millions of tulips, in colors I couldn't name now, colors that exist only in dreams, in fairy tales, in visions of the future. Roses, not yet summer roses, but spring roses, fragile ones that will wilt in a week, that are delicate as young people. And the people, they move about as if in a dream, hypnotized by beauty, grateful that the beauty is so overwhelming. And I buy a bouquet for a girl. The girl, I still see her face, though other details have faded, though I no longer remember her name. No, that's not true. I do remember the name, but I don't like to say it aloud, because that would make the person real, would make it clear that it's over, that the happiness is gone. But the girl carries that bouquet like a treasure, and for a short time, that afternoon, I'm the happiest man on this earth. The flower market in Amsterdam wasn't like other markets. It wasn't primarily a place of commerce. Yes, there was money, buying and selling, the economy had to function. But it was also a place of dreams, of hope, of beauty as a political statement, as an act of resistance. People needed flowers to say without words, the world isn't just gray. There's still color, there's still life, there's still hope. Humanity isn't lost. This was 1939, you understand, the year before the war, and though nobody said it aloud, though the newspapers weren't yet screaming of danger, you knew the darkness was coming, that soon enough another kind of night would fall, a night without flowers, without hope, without the right to be beautiful. I remember the smells. Oh, how can I describe the smells? It wasn't simply a floral scent. It was an abundance of scents, a chaos of perfumes, everything mixed together, everything competing, everything loudly crying for attention. Roses, faint and intense. Tulips, almost no scent at all, only the visual explosions, the colors shouting while your nose gets nothing. Hyacinths, so strong, so piercing that you could almost feel the air itself growing dizzy, drunk on perfume. And leaves, moisture, earth, all mixed with the metal smell of the market stalls, of money that had touched hands, of human effort. Even now, after so many years, I could smell them again if I closed my eyes. The market still lives in my nose, in my memory, immortal. An old man in the market. I can still see him, a gardener probably, with dirty hands, earth under his fingernails, gray hair wet from spray, speaks to me. He tells me that all these tulips will be dead in a week, that the roses will wilt in 9 days, that the hyacinths will lose their intoxicating scent, that everything I buy here is a mortal thing, something bound by time. That's what's beautiful about it, he says slowly. That's why we buy flowers, not because they stay, but because they don't, because they remind us that all beauty is brief, that you have to live now, that you have to touch the person you love now, that you can't wait, that you have no time to waste. And I don't fully understand what he means then, because I'm young and foolish and think I have forever, that the world won't change. But those words stay with me anyway, like seeds that will bear fruit later. I give the girl the bouquet, pink roses, yellow tulips, purple hyacinths, fragrant as a dream, and some leaves of damp green fern. And it rains that same evening, great drops that smear the colors, and the petals fall slowly onto the wet Amsterdam pavement, fall into puddles, staining the water red and orange and blue like tiny works of art. And the girl doesn't weep, she smiles, that smile, which I still see, which is still there in my memory, which still lives, like a dream that is true. She says this is even more beautiful, that the flowers are now giving all their color to the stone, that everything is transient, that everything flows like water, that even sorrow can be beautiful when you have flowers, when you can show someone, I think of you, I see you, I believe in beauty, I believe in you. And I kiss the girl, and it tastes of pollen and of the future, a future that won't come, but we didn't know that then. And my young soul doesn't think that this is the last hour I have with this person, that war is coming in a few months, that sorrow is coming, that darkness is coming and won't end, not for many years, that the pollen will never feel like this again. But the war did come. Yes, it all came, as the old gardener might have told me. The years came, the dark years, and we all grew older, faster, harder, more wounded. And I never see the girl again, though I try. Though after the war I visit Amsterdam and go to the flower market, hopeful, hopeful, hopeful. And it's not the same market. The people are different, older, sadder. But the flowers are still beautiful, still hopeful, still colorful, and I think, humanity hasn't quite destroyed beauty, not yet. And I ask an old man, is it the same old man or his son? And how long can a person live? How long can he sell flowers? Whether he remembers a girl who was here years ago with a bouquet. But of course, nobody remembers. It was long ago. These are just stories that exist only in dreams, that exist only on trains while you sleep. The flowers of 1939 are long since faded, of course. They died, as all flowers die. But the hope they represented, that never died. And the girl, I learned later that she survived. The war was dreadful, appalling, but she survived. And I imagined that perhaps she lived a life, that perhaps she had children, that perhaps she sometimes remembered a young man who gave her a bouquet, who told her that beauty matters, that love matters. And perhaps she passed that message on to her children. Perhaps she passed it on to her grandchildren. And perhaps this is how love becomes immortal. Not through perfect memories, but through the passing on of feelings, of hope, of beauty from generation to generation, invisible, like pollen on the wind. And now, on a train between Amsterdam and Haarlem, over 80 years later, I see a bouquet in a window, and I'm back there, and the girl is here again, and the flowers are still red and orange and violet, and it's still raining, and the petals are still falling, and the beauty is still there, and the sorrow is there too, both together, inseparable. And I lean my head against the train window, and my eyes grow heavy, and I still smell the flowers. Not the flowers in that shop window, but the flowers from then, from 1939. The flowers I bought for a girl. I still see her face, though the years have blurred it. The flowers that faded in a week, but whose memory still lives, still burns, still glows. The flowers that showed me that all beauty is brief, but that what is brief is therefore worth so much more, lives so much more, hurts so much more, is therefore so much more immortal. The feel of fine silk on the train seat. I'm sitting here in this compartment between Hamburg and Berlin, between two worlds, between one life and another. And suddenly, with this touch, I'm not alone anymore. I'm back in a dressmaker's shop, a small atelier in Hamburg in 1932, and everything is fabric, everything is color, everything is art, everything is hope in a time that has no hope. The woman who works there in this atelier full of cloth and needles and dreams doesn't simply make dresses. No, that's far too small to say. She creates dreams, she creates hope, she creates possibilities for women who want to feel beautiful, who want to see themselves, who want to believe that the future will be beautiful. The atelier is very bright. Windows facing north, so the light is always the same, always fair, always true. And everywhere fabric hangs on wooden rails. Silk from Italy, dark brown and red. Wool from England in green and blue shades. Cotton from Egypt, white and cream. And it all waits for hands, for needle, for this woman's vision of how cloth can become beauty. And the seamstress is in her mid-50s, I think, or perhaps older. Age is hard to say when someone lives in their work, but her eyes are sharp and young, sharp as a hawk's eyes, young as a child's eyes. And her hands are completely still. Still as water, still as prayer. She shows me how to sew a sleeve. The sleeve is truly complicated, much more complicated than I thought, far more complicated than it looks. And the curve must be perfect, absolutely perfect, or else the dress won't fit properly, or else the woman wearing it won't look beautiful. And she takes time, so much time, to show me how to make each stitch, how to keep the tension in the silk, how to understand that every fabric has its own wishes, that the art lies not in the sewing itself, but in listening, not in commanding, but in asking. Hamburg in 1932 is very dark, very gray. The economy has collapsed like a house of cards. People are unemployed, people are hopeless. People are afraid. But this woman still sews every day, sews for the women who have a little money left, sews for the women who need to feel beautiful. Sews because for her, sewing is a prayer, an act of resistance, an act of hope in a desperate time, a refusal to surrender. She tells me about her daughter, a really beautiful girl, intelligent, kind, who will soon be married. And she's sewing the wedding dress for her daughter. Not for money, absolutely not, but from a love deeper than words. And the fabric is the finest silk she has, the best material she's ever owned. And the stitches are small and even and so perfect you could weep. And it's absolutely clear that this is the most important dress this woman has ever sewn, that it means more than 1,000 other dresses. The dress is a prayer for her daughter's future, a blessing for a coming wedding, a hope for a life that will be beautiful, even if darkness comes. She shows me the dress when it's finished, and it's truly wonderful. It's breathtaking. It fits perfectly on the daughter. It's elegant without being showy. It says everything a wedding dress should say. This is a bride. This is a woman. This is a person who lives and loves and hopes, despite everything. And I see tears in the seamstress's eyes, and I know she's woven her own hope into this dress, that she's put her soul into every stitch, that the dress isn't just silk, but a prayer in fabric. I ask her what happens when it's all over, when war comes, when darkness comes, when the world collapses like a house of cards in the wind. And she tells me, her voice is calm, her hands are calm, there's no fear in her. Or perhaps there is fear, but she's accepted it. That beauty never ends, that you can always sew, that needle and thread work everywhere, even in the darkest times, even if everything is lost, even if there's only rags, that the art of sewing, the art of beauty, doesn't depend on the material, but on the heart. And I don't believe her then, because I'm young and foolish and don't know that she's right, that the human soul always hungers for beauty, regardless of circumstances, that hands always long to create beauty, even when the world says it's impossible, that it's a waste of time, that we should have war instead of dresses. She also showed me her tools. Not the sewing machine, though she had one, an old, expensive machine from Prussia that looked like a mechanical piano, but her handcraft tools. The scissors she'd used for 20 years, so sharp they cut through 4 layers of silk like air. The thimble of brass, worn from thousands of stitches, the rulers, the chalk knives, the needles of different thicknesses and lengths. Everything was old, everything was loved. She ran her fingers over the scissors like over a friend's face, and she said, "These scissors have helped me cut 100 wedding dresses, 100 women on their most beautiful day, 100 women who looked into my eyes and said, 'Thank you.' The scissors know this, the scissors remember, and when I use them, I'm not just using a tool, I'm using history, I'm using love, I'm using all the hopes I held for those 100 women." And suddenly, in that moment, while she speaks to her tools like to a beloved, I understand something. I understand that the seamstress is not just a person who makes dresses. She is a priestess of hope. She is someone who believes, with every fiber of her being believes, that beauty is not just decoration, not just superficiality, but that beauty is a prayer, that beauty is an act of resistance against darkness, that every dress she sews, every stitch she makes, is a sentence in a language that says, "In spite of everything, in spite of the economic crisis, in spite of the darkness I can feel coming, in spite of everything I don't know but sense, in spite of it all, I believe that tomorrow will be beautiful, that you will be beautiful, that there is a reason to be alive, even if I don't know what that reason is." And now, on this train, between Hamburg and Berlin, between two worlds, between two times, between life and death. I feel the silk in my hand, feel its smoothness, its warmth. And I'm back in that atelier in Hamburg in 1932. And I still see the seamstress before me, still see her hands that sew, that work, that create beauty. And I still hear the song of her needle, still hear the prayer of her work, still hear the love that sits in every stitch. And I know that she's been dead a long, long time, after all the years, after the war, after the darkness, but that her work lives, that the dresses she sewed still exist somewhere, still beautiful, still a prayer from another time, still a hope. My eyes close, and I'm no longer on the train between Hamburg and Berlin. I'm in the atelier, in light coming from the north, and the seamstress still sews forever, and the silk still flows under her hands, warm as blood, soft as prayer, gleaming as hope. And the hope is still there, despite everything, despite time, despite the darkness that came, that lasted so long, but couldn't destroy what matters, what is real, what was born from love and needles. A distant signal light in the night, a light that blinks orange and red like a heartbeat in the darkness. We're traveling between Schaffhausen and Singen, between Switzerland and Germany, and in this darkness, while I look through the window, I suddenly see something that carries me back to another light, another life, a life I thought I'd left behind. It's winter 1944, one of the worst winters of the war, and I'm not old as I am now. I'm young, perhaps in my early 20s, perhaps even younger. And I'm standing at a border, guarding a pass, holding the world apart with my body, with my weapons, with my decisions upon which life and death hang. Switzerland in 1944 is a peculiar place, a place that lies between worlds, between war and peace, between occupation and freedom, neutral in a war that devours the whole world, that tears Europe to shreds, that kills millions. And we stand here, Switzerland, and say, no, this doesn't concern us. And the border guards were neither soldiers nor police, but something in between, something that holds the world together, something that prevents people from simply stepping across. Guard this invisible line, this dream of neutrality, this lie of safety. It's cold in this winter, mercilessly cold, colder than the human body should endure, and the snow falls on the mountain passes like a blanket over truth, like a blanket over the refugees trying to cross the border, trying to survive. I meet an old man, an older colleague, someone who's been standing at this border for many years, who knows this border perhaps better than anyone else. He shows me everything, how to find the border posts, how to know where Switzerland ends and Germany begins, how to recognize the footprints in the snow, which are fresh and which are old, which come from people crossing legally and which don't. And he tells me, and I never forget these words. These words are like seeds in my head that later grow and become great trees, that the border isn't really real, that it's just an agreement between people, that the border exists only on paper, that in truth the mountains know no borders, the snow knows no borders, that people make borders, not God, not nature, but people with their fears and their weapons. And in that night, I still remember every detail, still the cold, still the snow, still the fearful face. There's a knock at the border post. Not loud, not dramatic, just a quiet, urgent knock. The knock of a man who knows his life depends on it. A refugee, let's say, someone from Germany, someone who's Jewish or political or simply too old or too young, someone who can't stay anymore, who will die if we send him back. And we have to decide, the old border guard and I, and perhaps 2 or 3 others, in a few seconds, in a few minutes. Neutrality means we send him back, but humanity means we let him go. And the old man looks at me, and in his eyes I see the whole war, all wars, the whole pain of the world, the impossibility of acting rightly when there are no right answers, when both decisions are wrong.
We let the refugee go. It's illegal. We should have sent him back, should have handed him over to the German border police, should have protected our neutrality. But it's right. Right in the sense of humanity, of ethics, of what the soul needs to remain a soul. And in that night, as the snow falls and the refugee disappears into the darkness, I learned something I'll never forget. That borders don't divide the world, but the world creates borders to protect itself, to say, this is safe, this is my homeland, that is not safe, that is enemy territory. But in truth, there is no safety. There are only different degrees of danger, different places to die, different countries suited differently to dying in, depending on who you are, how old you are, whether you're Jewish or not, whether you're politically dangerous or not. After that night, things change. The snow falls deeper, the temperatures grow colder, and more refugees come. It's as if the world is breaking down, as if all of humanity is on the move, trying to escape from what's coming. And every night we stand there at the border and make the same decision, the same difficult, impossible, right decision. And every night after we let someone go, we have to sit down again and drink hot tea, and the old border guard speaks to me about the world that's coming. He speaks of a Europe that will need to be rebuilt, of people who'll need to learn to forgive themselves, of borders that perhaps should never have existed, that perhaps exist only in our heads, in our fear, in our hearts, which are no bigger than the fear of one person, no older than war itself. I also remember another moment, not in that night, but later, much later, after months at this border. The snow is gone, it's spring, and flowers are blooming in the Alps, and the old border guard shows me the mountain passes, shows me where the border is, and suddenly I see that the border isn't really there. There's no wall. There's no border station that's particularly remarkable. The border is simply an agreement people make to say, here Switzerland ends, here Germany begins. But in truth, it's all the same. It's all earth, it's all mountain, it's all the same world. And when you cross the border, and we can see it from where we stand, you don't see that you're leaving the world. You just see forest becomes forest, tree becomes tree, snow becomes snow. Nature knows no borders. Only people do. The old man tells me, later, much later, after we've let the refugee go, that after the war everything will be different, that nothing will be the same again, that humanity must understand itself, that the borders must be redrawn, not with lines on maps, but with understanding, with compassion, that we can't simply go back to the life we had before, that the old life is dead, that we need to wake up from a dream of safety and neutrality. And I believe him, even though I don't fully understand what he means, even though I'm younger than him, even though I have my whole life ahead of me. I'm too young, I'm too naive. I don't know that the borders will tear forever, that the world is changed forever, that this night at the border will change my life, will mark me forever. And now, on this train between Schaffhausen and Singen, over 80 years later, 1944 is long ago, is almost another world. I still see that signal light, the light that blinks in the night that tells me, here is a border, here the world divides. And I'm back at the border, in the cold, in the snow, and the old border guard is still there, with his wise gaze, his patience, his responsibility. And the refugee is still there, still begging, still hoping. And the question is still unanswered, will perhaps never be answered. What is the right answer when there is no right answer, when all answers are wrong? My eyes grow heavy on this train, and I sleep. And I'm still at that border, still young, still uncertain, still trying to do the right thing,
as night falls over the mountains, and the signal lights blink orange and red in the darkness, and the world tries to understand itself, tries to know how to live when there is war, when people die, when borders are meaningless. The click of chalk on slate. Suddenly, unexpectedly, quite unexpectedly, as I sit on this train between Lucerne and Bern, as the mountains slide past and the distance grows dark, takes me back to a tiny schoolroom somewhere in the Swiss Alps in the 1950s. Good grief, how long ago that was. 7 decades, perhaps more. And the woman who stands at that blackboard, holding long, thin chalk, writing and writing as the light falls, is the finest teacher I ever had, the finest teacher I will ever know. The village was small, so small it barely appeared on a map, so small the nearest town was 5 kilometers away, so small everyone knew everyone. And the school was even smaller, an old building from the 19th century with tall windows facing south so the light was always good, so the children could see, so they wouldn't grow tired. With benches made of dark brown wood, polished smooth by the backsides of 100 years of children who all came before me, and all will come after, and all will be taught by this woman. And on one wall was the slate board, not black but dark gray, smooth as silk, well kept, well loved, and when you dragged chalk across it, when the chalk ran along the stone, it made that sound, the click, the scrape, that was like music for the soul, like the sound of hope, of knowledge being born. And the teacher, she was perhaps 55, perhaps older, I could never tell. But her eyes were young, young as a child's eyes, seeing the world for the first time. And she didn't simply teach mathematics or history or geography. No, she taught how to think, how to ask questions, how to see the world, not as settled truth, but as a great question that always remains open. She'd write equations on the board, numbers, symbols, the language of mathematics, and I'd see how the chalk in her hand almost danced, almost sang, how the chalk was an instrument, not just a tool, but music. And she wouldn't simply explain mechanically how to solve problems, just the number, just the answer, but why mathematics is true, why logic mirrors nature, why numbers are beautiful. And when someone asked a question, and she always encouraged questions, created a space where questions weren't silly but meaningful, she'd take time, real time, so much time, to listen, to understand, to truly help the student, not just give an answer, but show the student how to think for themselves. The village itself was quiet, peaceful, almost sleepy. A place the modern world hadn't yet discovered, that didn't yet know the world was changing, that trains were getting faster, that television was coming. People lived slowly, worked slowly, thought slowly, and it wasn't unhappy, just simple. And this teacher was like a light in that slowness, a fire burning in the midst of that stillness, calling the children to dream, to hope, to know that there was more than just this tiny village, that there were great cities and great thoughts and great possibilities for each of us. I remember one day especially. It was autumn, I think, early October, and the light fell sharp and golden through the tall windows, and the village children suddenly looked very beautiful, all bathed in that golden light, that warmth. And the teacher wrote a poem on the board, not for a lesson, not for a test, but simply because it inspired her, because she loved it, because she understood that poetry matters for the soul. And we all sat there and read it. We were perhaps 10 children in that classroom, 10 different ages, 10 different worlds, and read the words, and the words sounded like music in my ears, and I understood for the first time that language itself is beautiful, that language isn't just a tool for communicating, but that words themselves can be beautiful, that words aren't just meaning, but can also feel, that words have souls. She asked us then what the poem meant, what it told us, what it did in our hearts. And we gave different answers. One child said one thing, another said something quite different. We were all different. We all saw something different. All different, all right, all true. And she nodded, not as if she were judging us, not as if she were deciding who understood correctly and who didn't, but as if she knew us deeply, understood that each soul sees the poem differently, that there's no single wrong answer, just different truths, different ways of seeing the world. The school itself was a sanctuary, I'd say. A place where the world outside, the poverty of the villagers, the hard work, the loneliness of the mountains, stopped, could not enter. And instead there was this classroom, this warm room full of books and windows and the smell of chalk and wood. The teacher had organized everything with extreme care, books arranged by size, ink in a special cupboard, slate tablets for each student looked after, loved. And on the walls hung maps of the world, not maps of Switzerland, but maps of Africa, Asia, the Pacific. And I remember looking at those maps and thinking, there are other people there, other lives, other languages, and perhaps one day I can go there. Perhaps I'm not doomed to stay in this village forever. The teacher had given me that hope without saying a word. She'd shown me the world is big, that there are places to go, that life is more than what I see. She was strict too, I think, in hindsight. Or perhaps not strict, but demanding. She insisted we do our best work. She wouldn't let us be lazy, ignore her teaching, pretend we didn't understand when we were really just too lazy to think. And for some students that was hard. They came from families who couldn't read, who didn't understand why education mattered. But she, the teacher, fought for us. She stayed after lessons. She came to our homes and spoke to our parents. She showed them their child was intelligent, that their child deserved a future that wasn't just farm work and labor and pain. She wasn't just a teacher. She was a fighter, a prophet, a priest for the hope of a new generation. After years, many lives later, after love and career and pain and hope all together, I heard that this teacher had died, that she no longer taught, that the slate board remained empty, that another teacher had come to take her place. And I was sad, sadder, much sadder than I should have been, for someone I knew only 2 or 3 years when I was perhaps 9 or 10 years old, a child who probably barely thought of her after I left that village. But I knew she'd changed my life, that she'd shown me the world was open, that education wasn't just for tests, but for the soul, that questions matter more than answers, that the way you think is more important than what you know. And now, on this train between Lucerne and Bern, I hear that click again, and I'm back in that classroom, and the teacher is still there, still writing on the board, and her chalk still dances, and the children still sit quietly, still listen, and the autumn sun still shines through the windows, and the world is still open, full of possibilities. And my eyes grow heavy, and I sleep. And I'm still in that classroom, and the teacher still teaches, and the chalk still clicks, and the questions are still open. And I'm still 9 years old, still grateful for this moment, still inspired by this woman who showed me that education isn't just for tests, but for the soul, for freedom, for hope. I met the herbalist on a train through the Engadin on the route from Chur to St. Moritz, a route famous for its viaducts and spiral tunnels winding up the mountain like a spiral of stone and steel. It was early summer, and the alpine meadows stood in full bloom, a sea of colors, yellow and blue and pink and violet, so dense and so alive you felt the mountains had dressed themselves for a celebration. And the smell coming through the open windows, sweet and bitter and fresh and green, a smell that spoke of life, of growth, of summer just beginning. She was a woman in her 70s,
with a weather-tanned face and eyes the color of gentian, a deep, glowing blue you don't forget. Her hands were rough and brown, hands that had root and earth and picked herbs and dug roots, and they smelled of thyme and chamomile, and something earthy and warm I couldn't name. On her lap lay a basket covered with cloth, beneath which something green and fragrant was hidden. I noticed the smell, that intoxicating, many-layered fragrance rising from her basket, and she smiled and pulled back the cloth. Herbs. Dozens of herbs, freshly picked, tied in little bundles. Arnica, she said, pointing at the yellow flowers. Yarrow, lady's mantle, plantain, St. John's wort. Each has its purpose, each has its story, each has its time. 40 years, she told me. 40 years I've gathered herbs in these mountains. My mother taught me, and her mother taught her, and it goes back further than anyone can remember. We are the women who know what lives in the plants, what heals, and what eases, and what comforts. It's not a secret, and not magic. It's observation. Decades, centuries of observation. Knowledge passed hand to hand like a seed planted in fertile earth. She told me about her garden. Behind my house, she said, on a south-facing slope, protected from the wind by an old stone wall, lies my garden. It's not large, but it has everything you need. Lavender at the entrance, because lavender drives away sadness. Lemon balm under the window, because its scent brings sleep. Sage on the wall, because sage cleanses. And in the farthest corner, where the sun shines brightest, the rosemary. Rosemary is for memory, she said. Whoever smells rosemary remembers everything they'd forgotten. But the best herbs, she said, you don't find in a garden. You find them higher up, on the high pastures, in places only the chamois go, and the wind and the light. Arnica grows where the snow last melted. Gentian grows in the cracks between rocks where no one looks. And Edelweiss. Edelweiss grows only where you don't look for it. That's the rule of the mountains, she said. The most precious things are found in places you only reach if you're willing to leave the easy path. Things that are given to you when you're not searching for them, but simply attentive, simply present, with open eyes and quiet hands. She told me how she dries the herbs. In my room, she said, bundles hang from the ceiling. All summer I gather, and all autumn I dry. The room smells so intensely then, so fully, that visitors sometimes stop at the door and just breathe, deep and long, and some say it smells like a prayer. And in winter, when snow lies and the mountains are white and the world is still, then I make teas and tinctures and salves, and every jar I open brings summer back. The smell of the meadows, the warmth of the sun, the humming of bees over the flowers, everything preserved in a small jar, in a bundle of dried leaves, in a drop of tincture. I asked what the herbs had taught her, and she thought for a while, smelled a sprig of thyme slowly, eyes closed, and then she said, "Nature has a remedy for everything, not always a cure, sometimes just comfort. Sometimes just ease. Sometimes just a scent that reminds you the world is beautiful. But she has something for everything. For sadness, she has St. John's wort, which brings light to the dark days. For fear, she has valerian, which calms the nerves like a warm hand on the heart. For sleeplessness, she has hops and passion flower, which bring the mind to rest like a lullaby. And for longing she has rosemary, that reminds you that what you long for is never truly lost, that it lives in you, in your memory, in your heart, and that a single scent is enough to bring it back. She got off at a stop that looked like the end of the world. A wooden platform, mountains all around, meadows full of flowers, and a silence so great you could hear the bells of cattle far above on the high pastures. She took her basket, nodded to me, and walked up a path that disappeared among the flowers, like a thread losing itself in a colorful carpet. Nature has a remedy for everything. I think of that when the world grows too loud. Then I close my eyes and smell lavender and thyme and chamomile and earth, and remember her garden on the southern slope, the bundles hanging from the ceiling, the summer kept in a small jar. The train carries on, and through the window drifts a hint of herbs. Or do I imagine it? Thyme, lavender, chamomile. The scents mix with the rattle of the wheels and with my breath that grows slower and deeper and quieter, like the breath of someone with lemon balm under the window. And sleep comes, all on its own. I met the Cobbler on the line between Brixen and Brunnich, on one of those cool South Tyrolean December trains that crawl slowly through the valleys and make the mountains sharper and sharper with every kilometer. The windows were steamed from the cold outside and the warmth within, and the landscape was only shadows, dark blue, almost black against the winter sky. You could hear how the wheels took the curves, how the whole metal of the train sang very quietly, like a prayer. He sat across from me with two large linen sacks beside him. Not new shoes from his workshop, but leather in all colors, like an old rainbow archive. Brown like damp earth after rain, black like deep night, red like a faded wine, gray like stone, even a particular green, dark as moss. He was an older man with palms that were broader than palms ought to be, fingers like small beams of oak wood that wouldn't stay still. Constantly he sorted the leather, held each piece to the weak light coming through the train window, nodded satisfied, or shook his head gently, as if he were having a private conversation with each piece of leather, delicate, respectful. Of course I had to ask. I couldn't help it. It was like magnetism, like when you smell a scent and have to follow it. Have you made shoes all these years? Are you a cobbler? And he laughed, not loudly, but like someone enjoying a private joke, a joke only he knows but is happy to share. Made? He said slowly, thoughtfully, as if speaking the word for the first time. No, that is the wrong word. Not made. I have opened them. That is quite different, quite distinct. I didn't understand at first. The logic wasn't there, what I'd expected. But then he told me, with calm, without hurry, while the train sang its rails, about his workshop in the marketplace of Brunnich, at the foot of these South Tyrolean mountains where winter is hard and long, and where shoes aren't just fashion but necessity, safety, friend. A cobbler for 58 years. 58. Not always with full order books, not always with wealthy customers from the city, but every morning, Monday, Tuesday, every day,
in the workshop. Door open, light on, tools out. The tools as old as a person, older even, older than his own life.
"A new shoe," he said, and his gaze suddenly became very clear, like when someone looks into the distance. "That is only building material. Leather and seam and sole. Beautiful, yes, very beautiful, but asleep. A pair of boots, they come into me, hiking boots, work boots, torn, tattered, the sole worn to nothing, the lining ripped out, the sides loose, closed to the future. But when I change the sole, with my hands, with my tools, with my time, when I renew the lining, thread new laces, remake every stitch, everything, then I open these shoes for a second journey, a third, a fourth, sometimes a fifth." He held the red leather up to the light, and it nearly glowed, like blood in water, like fire in snow. "This red," he said, and every word was precious. "This red is from a mountain boot, a lady's hiking boot. It was dark brown originally, very dark brown, but the sun and snow and rain and all the storms have colored it red, or the dust from the mountains, or simply life itself. For 18 years this boot has walked, over glaciers so blue and cold, through summer grass, on sharp rocks, over water. For 18 years this boot has done everything for its wearer. And now it's tired. The woman, I know her, she comes to me every year. I recognize her voice before she speaks. The woman said last year, 'Once more? Can you do it once more?' And I said, yes, of course. I will open it. Trust me. Let me open it." His eyes shone as he said this. Not proud, not vain, not boastful. Just satisfied, just fulfilled. The way a person looks when he knows exactly why he gets out of bed in the morning, why the sun rises, why the world is still there. The sun was just coming up over the mountains. We were very near Brunick, and cast long black shadows on his leather, and the colors grew deeper, older, wiser, almost luminous. It looked as if the shoes themselves were telling where they'd walked, which paths, which mountains, which people, which love. "A new shoe is selfish," the cobbler continued, and his tone became almost philosophical, almost priestly, like when someone whispers in a church. "It wants only its first wearer, only one story, the best story perhaps. But an old shoe has learned from the world. The shoe knows gentleness and violence. The shoe knows what it is to be loved, put on in the morning, or forgotten in a corner. The shoe knows joy and worry. And I am just an old man, almost a tool, a hand that listens to this shoe and helps it pass its knowledge, its patience, its faithfulness to the next person. That is all. That is enough." We sat for a while in silence, only the rattle of the train and the mountains outside. Then he showed me old photographs, a few on yellowed paper which he carried in an inside pocket, like treasures, like relics. Hiking boots from shepherds, everywhere on the mountains, broad-legged, practical. Dance shoes from someone who danced in Vienna and Graz, he said, and the shoes looked like small wings, so light, so precise. Leather slippers, very old, very narrow, almost delicate, like for a king or emperor, and he said, perhaps true, perhaps not, but his eyes didn't lie, that an Austrian emperor had worn them. Or maybe just a village king, perhaps. Every shoe had gained a face under his hands. Not the face of its wearer, no, but the face of its purpose, its destiny, its soul. I asked him if he didn't grow tired. 58 years. The same workshop, the same tools, the same work every day, morning after morning, winter after winter. Tired of the repetition, tired of the quiet, tired of the routine? And he answered me something I hadn't expected, something that stilled me,
that made me, myself, tired, sleepy. "Tired?" he said. "Tired? No, but always slower. Every year a bit slower. My hands have not become faster, you understand, no. But my hands have become more patient. Always more patient, with every year. Each year a little more patience in my fingers. And that is better, that is much better than fast. Fast is young, but patient, that is wise." The mountains grew bigger, nearer as we approached Brunnick. The train slowed down, as if it too became respectful before this place, this city nestled between the rocks like a jewel. The cobbler put his red leather away, not in haste, not quickly. Every movement was a small ceremony, a small ritual showing respect. He leaned his head against the window. "Back there," he said, and gestured to the roofs of the city. "Back there sits my workshop. For 60 years my father was there, a great man, a great cobbler. For 58 years I've been there now. Tomorrow morning, when the sun rises, I'll sit down again and someone will come in, an old woman perhaps, or a young laborer with torn soles, broken from walking, from living, step by step, and I will say slowly, very slowly, 'Look, let me open your shoes. Let me prepare them for a new journey. Trust me, I know my craft.'"
And slowly his voice grew quieter. It was as if the night itself was covering him, wrapping him. The rhythm of the train, ta-dum, 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 sounded like hammer blows on an anvil, endless, calm, soothing, like a heartbeat. Outside, snow lay on the fields, white and pure and silent, and everything looked like a great workshop itself, where the mountains and fields were being repaired by winter itself, year after year, winter after winter, and everything grew slower. My eyes grew heavier and heavier, and I thought of all the shoes in this world, all the shoes that still want to be opened, of all the people who can walk once more, because someone like this cobbler is patient, not fast, patient. And the mountains grew grayer, and the rattle grew quieter, and the breath grew slower, and everything warmer and warmer. The train goes on, and the workshop is very far away now. But somewhere someone sits, with broad, wise hands, and opens an old shoe very slowly, and gives it a new journey, a new path, warm and patient, slow. I met the lace maker on the line between Plauen and Zwickau in the Vogtland, where the mountains are small but wild, packed with history, and where factories stand like red cathedrals from another century. It was December, and the train windows were steamed from the cold outside and warmth within, and through the glass I could see the house lights like dreams, blurred and far away, like seeing them with eyes closed. She wasn't sitting directly across from me, but at the other end of the compartment, leaning against the window, and in front of her on her lap. The window seat was surprisingly broad and spacious, a large cushion board with 100 fine threads, 100 small spools of delicate shimmer and white. I didn't understand at first what she was doing, but then I saw. Her fingers moved the way water flows, the way music sounds, quick and precise at once. And the fine, almost invisible threads flowed through her fingers like thoughts, like dreams. A rhythm without sound, a dance without music. She was perhaps my age or older, with grayed hair but not tired, and eyes that never looked up from the work, until I asked her directly, until I could resist no longer. "What are you doing there?" I asked, very simply, very directly, like a child. "It looks like
Magic? How are you casting spells with your fingers?" And she laughed quietly, not scornfully, not impatiently, but like someone recognizing her own private language being understood after long years. She lifted her gaze from the cushion, only briefly, only long enough to look me in the eye, and smiled. "Lace," she said, her voice warm as warm milk. "That is lace, handwork, bobbin lace, we say here in the Vogtland. With spools and fine threads and a cushion like this, you can make the most beautiful things, the most invisible things, the forgotten things." And then, surprising me but not dismissing me, she stopped working. Just for a moment, just long enough to explain to me like a secret. "The spools," she said, "are little wooden bobbins, each wound with a thread from linen, from cotton, sometimes from silk. The finer the lace, the finer the thread, the older the craft. The thread must be absolutely perfect, must be flawless, or it breaks or tears and everything is ruined. And the cushion," she pointed to it with an upright finger as if pointing to something sacred, "is not a pillow for sleeping, no. It is a work field, a canvas, a sanctuary. Little pins stick in it in a pattern, in an order, and each thread is wound around these pins and twisted and interwoven, and from this complex, fine interlacing emerges lace, beauty." She told me she lives in Plauen, in one of 100 old flats, all looking like fairy tale houses from a German folk tale, with gables and ornaments, and that Plauen is known throughout the world for lace, perhaps the finest lace in Europe, the famous lace from the Vogtland. So fine it's like frozen breath, like woven moonlight. For 60 years she's been making lace. 60 years. She began as a small girl, 6 years old, and a grandmother showed her the finger movements, the exact motions, the right tension, the secret rhythm. And ever since, always the spools, always the threads, always the patience. "But why?" I asked. "There are machines now, computers, factories with robots. That is very hard, very boring perhaps. Always the same movement, the same tension in your fingers, year after year." And she looked at me, really at me, not politely but deeply. And her eyes weren't angry but very, very clear. "Boring," she said. "No, a thread is never boring. Every thread has a will, every thread has a voice, perhaps? No, that's not the right word. Every thread has a personality, a life, a destiny. When I work with 100 threads at once, I'm not alone. I'm with 100 other persons, 100 little stories woven together into one great story, a lace story." She took a single thread from a spool, so thin you could barely see it. You could only feel it with eyes squeezed shut. "Look," she said, and held it to the window. "This is a thread of linen. This thread was once a flax plant in Belgium, or perhaps in France, or here in Saxony in a field. The sun raised it, the rain made it wet, the wind bent it, and then hands, not my hands, other hands, working hands before me, generations before me, twisted and pulled this flax stem, stretched it and pulled it until this fine, perfect thread emerged. And then this thread comes to me and I continue it. I continue the story of this thread with 100 other threads, 100 other stories. Altogether becomes something marvelous, something that will hang on a wedding dress or on a curtain in an old church or simply on a window where someone sees the world through fine lace between them, like a dream." The train took a sharp curve, and the cushion board shifted a little to the side. She reached quickly, quicker than quick, faster than thought, faster than a young woman, and caught all 100 spools. Her hands were not young. They were old, with deep wrinkles, with brown marks of work, with visible signs of 60 years of labor, of decades. But they were sure, they were exact, they were like clockwork. They moved like an instrument that's been played for decades, that a person knows by instinct, not with the mind, but with the heart.
"There are fewer young people who want to do this," she said to me, as she arranged the spools again, each in its place, with respect. "That is sad. That is truly sad. Not because there is money or fame. There isn't much of either in this work, little fame, small wages. But because this here, this is a secret. An old secret. A secret that links the old time with the new. My grandmother, she knew the names of all her 100 threads. She christened them, literally, as if they were children. That is Magdalena, she said to me, and that there is Franz, and that one there is a wild one. Her name is Elvira. She always makes trouble. She won't do what I say. And I have passed it on, the name, the names, the rhythm, the respect for each individual thread." She set herself to work again. Her fingers moved the way water flows, the way music sounds, quick and rhythmic at once, precise. A pattern so fine I couldn't really see what she was doing, but I could feel the feeling in the air, the feeling that something beautiful was being born, something that didn't exist before, didn't exist previously, and from her hand, new life came into the world. Outside the window, it began to snow, large, slow flakes, and the lights of the Vogtland grew even farther away, even more dreamlike, ever further. And she worked on, not rushed, not slow, but exactly right, at the perfect pace. The rhythm of right work, work that is love. "This piece here," she said, without looking up. Her fingers moved on, ever on, "will be a bridal lace for a young woman in Leipzig who will marry in 2 months, who doesn't yet know her grandmother. Every pattern is different. No 2 laces are the same. If you make 10,000 laces, 10,000, not one of them is a copy of another, each unique, each different. That is strange, no? A machine could make 100 identical laces, perfect, identical, boring. But a woman, a human hand, makes 100 different, 100 variations on a theme. Just as every snowflake is different, and every heart beats differently." I leaned back, and my eyes grew heavier and heavier, because I watched her fingers, the movement of her fingers, the tension of the threads, the rhythm of the train. Ta-dum, 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 all mixed like colors on wet paper. And slowly it became like a song, a simple, old song, and the fine threads transformed in my half-sleep into moonlight rays, into conversations of 100 people talking to each other, interwoven, that perhaps love each other, that are there for one another. Outside, snow fell, very slowly now, and the spools turned round and round, and the threads interwove, and the young bride stands somewhere in Leipzig, not yet knowing that an old woman on the train is making her lace, her story, her love, for her wedding. The train goes on, and the fingers work, very slowly now, ever slower, and 100 threads become one voice, become one heart, and the lace becomes ever finer, ever more beautiful, and I glide slowly into the snow, into the dream, into the warm, soft sleep. The creaking of wood woke me tonight, traveling from Uten to Kiel through Holstein, where the landscape is flat and the sky endless. The compartment was dark, except for the faint moonlight falling through the windows, gray and silver,
and the train moved slowly through thick forest, and with every curve, every unevenness of the rails, the wood of the seat beneath me creaked, the wood of the wall panels creaked, the whole wooden skeleton of the train creaked, like an old man coughing. And this sound, it took me back to someone I met many years ago, to an old man named Friedrich, the last wheelwright in Holstein, to his workshop, which no longer exists. Friedrich was a wheelwright, that is, a craftsman, a man who builds wagons, turns wheels, knows wood the way other people know faces, the way a lover knows his beloved's voice. I met him on a train, not in this modern one, no, in a much older train, many years ago, early 60s it was, when the world moved slowly and trains were still built from wood. And the train was entirely, completely made of wood, really from wood, not like these new trains made from cold metal and plastic. That train then, it sounded like a whole symphony of wood. Every unevenness, every sound the rails made, the whole train orchestra was wood, breathed wood, was alive like wood. Friedrich sat across from me then, in another life, another time, and he was already very old, perhaps 80 years or more, with large, broad hands that looked like wood, dark brown and split from work and years, with veins like the rings of a tree, with nails like spokes. And he worked the entire journey, the whole journey from Euten to Kiel. He worked on something small, something delicate that I couldn't quite see, it was too small. But the sound, that was clear as a bell. Sandpaper, very, very fine sandpaper, very quiet, almost inaudible, just a gentle whisper of stone against wood, and the aroma of fresh, warm wood dust came to me, sweet and spicy. I asked him what he was doing, and why he worked while a good man would sleep. And he lifted something, very carefully, as if holding a child. A wheel. A small wheel, made of fine spokes and a hub and a rim, all from wood, all handmade. That, he said, and his voice was very quiet. That is not simple. It looks simple, yes, very simple, like a child's toy, but it is not simple. That is the heart of a wagon, the soul. Everything else, the box, the axles, the shafts, the yoke, that is just body, just material. But the wheel is the soul, the essence, the thing that moves everything. And then, God, how long I spoke with him then. He told me about his craft, about his workshop in a small village in Holstein on the edge of Kiel, a village of perhaps 100, 150 houses, quite small, quite simple, with names I've forgotten. And every house needed wagons to transport hay, potatoes, cow's milk for the whole daily life. And Friedrich, he was the only man in all that region who built wagons with his hands, with his old, wise hands, with his tools older than Friedrich himself, without machinery. Everything was hands, everything was love. A wheel, he said. And as he speaks, he works on, sanding and sanding with endless patience, smoothing the wood until it's silk. Must be absolutely perfect. Really. The spokes must all be equal in length, to the millimeter, to half a millimeter almost, where the wagon lurches and the horse goes mad, becomes nervous, perhaps refuses to move. And the farmer grows angry at me, or at the wheel, or at life. And I cannot have that. The hub, that is the center of the wheel, the middle, that must be made from the right wood, you understand? Not too hard, not too soft. Oak is good, yes, but only certain oak. Oak that grew in the right winters, with the right rainfall, with the right light. A tree that grew in a particular forest. You know that when you have 100 years of experience. I asked him why it's so complicated. Why not simply take wood, cut it, nail it together, done? Why this long, slow work? And he laughed, Not heartily, not unkindly, but like someone who knows very old, very deep things, who knows the truth of the world. "Because," he said, and set the wheel down very carefully as if it were a sacred thing, "because wood is still alive. Wood is not dead, you understand. It is not like stone, not like metal. Wood dries, it shrinks, it changes with the weather, with temperature, with the season. A wheel made from green wood, still wet, that works 2 weeks perhaps, and then cracks. Everything breaks, everything is ruined. But if you know that, if you don't just know wood, but respect it, even love it, then you can make something that lasts 100 years, that outlasts the person who made it, that outlasts the children and grandchildren almost." The train passed through a village, and I knew at once it was his village, his home village, where his workshop stood. And I saw a small workshop with a red, weathered roof on the edge of the tracks beside a field. And Friedrich pointed to it with his bony finger. "There," he said, and suddenly his voice was full of something that was pride or love or sorrow. "There I turned wheels for 60 years. 60 years, every day, the same workshop, the same tools, some older than I am. My father began, and his father before him, and the father of fathers. 5 generations of wheelwrights, all in this workshop. And now I am the last. My son, he didn't want to learn. He became a merchant, works in a bank in Hamburg. And his son plays with computers. Nobody of the young people wants to be a wheelwright." He showed me the finished wheel again. It was so beautiful, simple, so pure, but perfect, absolutely perfect. No ornament, no paint, no decoration, just wood, raw, oiled with linseed oil, shining like light. And it was so light in his old hands, but he said it could hold a weight of 2 tons. 2 tons on this wheel alone. And the other 3 wheels would hold that too. Together they would carry 4 tons, would hold a whole wagon stacked with hay to the sky, with potatoes, with people, with life, with love. "I am old now," said Friedrich, and suddenly he looked very, very old, very tired, as if the sandpaper was wearing away his life. "My hands ache from the work, and the new wagons, they are made of metal now, industry, factory. No hands anymore, no soul anymore, no story anymore. My son, he didn't want to continue the tradition, and his son, nobody. Someone is the last in his family, and then it's all over. Like when a church closes, like when a language dies and nobody speaks it anymore. And suddenly it's as if the language, the culture, the beauty, as if it had never existed. And now, on this new journey, on this modern train, with this modern wood or plastic wood mixture, it still creaks. And I'm back with Friedrich. And I can almost see him sanding the spokes, see him knowing wood, respecting it, really loving it with his whole heart. And I know his workshop is long gone, that probably a supermarket stands there now, or gray apartment blocks. And Friedrich is long gone too, to heaven perhaps, where the wagons are still made of wood. But the creaking remains, and with every creak I hear his hands working, see his wheels that are still rolling somewhere, on distant farms perhaps, in museums, in memories, in my dreams, and I feel warm and safe and so tired. And I sleep. The train goes on, through Holstein, through the night, and the wood creaks, and Friedrich works still, somewhere in the dream, in the spokes, in the wheel, in my eyes. Heavy, so heavy, and warm. And the wheel turns slowly, slowly, and I with it. I'm at the felt maker on the line from Eichstätt to Teustlingen in Bavaria, where the rivers are still and flow slowly like time, and where the houses look like they're from old fairy tales, with red roofs and wooden shutters. It was a winter evening, and the train was full of people heading out for walks or visiting friends, relatives, grandmothers. But they were all asleep already, deep and sound in thick coats, and I was still awake, for no reason, no purpose, just awake. She sat with 2 large red bags beside her, wool spilling out of them, dense, fluffy, white as snow, gray as ash, dark blue as the night sky. On her lap, the first time I ever saw such a thing, she had a bowl of warm water. Not tea, not coffee, no, just water. And in it lay fibers, hair, wool. I didn't understand what it was, couldn't grasp the logic until she saw me watching and laughed very quietly. "Wool," she said simply, as if that explained everything. "I make felt. I make felt on the train while I travel. It calms me. It makes me peaceful." Felt. The word was strange to me. It sounds almost like an animal or an illness. I asked what it meant, and she explained it very patiently, as if speaking to a child, but without condescension, with genuine love for the explanation. Felt is not cloth, not like cotton or wool woven on a loom. Felt comes into being when you take wool, raw wool, unspun wool, and work with water and warmth and friction. You rub the wool again and again, gently or firmly depending, and slowly. You almost don't see it happen. It's like magic. The fibers compress, intertwine like lovers, become something entirely new. Into felt, dense, warm, stable, almost magical. She showed me a finished piece of felt from her bag, a flat disc the size of a palm, gray like a young mouse, warm to hold, soft but also stable with weight. "I made this last month," she said, and I could see she was proud of this felt, but not boastfully, just satisfied. "This will be part of a hat. You take many such pieces and sew them together into a large hat that a woman will wear in winter, and her head will be warm, and the felt will breathe and absorb moisture and not let the cold through." She paused, her gaze grew distant. "But actually, that is not the most important thing." She laid the felt on the table between us, very carefully, as if setting down something sacred. "The most important thing is the craft itself, not the result, not the finished hat, not the woman who wears it. The most important thing is the journey, the work, the transformation. You see, when I make felt, I don't look at the clock. I don't think about problems at home, about bills, about worries. My mind becomes quiet, white as the felt itself. And my hands, they work with the wool, not against it. They listen to what the wool wants, what form it wants to take, and they help it become, to realize, to fulfill itself." She took her bowl again and took from the warm water a handful of raw wool, white and fluffy still, like a cloud. With very concentrated attention, her eyes were narrowed, she began to rub. Not quickly, not forcefully, not impatiently, but gently, methodically, with a rhythm that was light and breathing, rhythmic yet flexible, meditative. "Every time I do this," she said, as her hands work, always work, "I imagine something. Maybe I imagine who will wear this hat. Maybe I imagine their name. Perhaps an old woman who lives in the mountains, who could live in Austria, and who goes outside every morning in this hat and looks at the world and thinks, 'It is good that my head is warm.'" I asked her if it isn't mad, making up names for people you don't know, for hats you might never see. The wearer will not meet the felt maker, will not know that a woman on a train made felt for her. And she looks at me, her hands still for a moment, but only one. "Mad?" she said. "No, that is the opposite of mad. That is very rational, very wise, very true. When I make a hat, I make it for someone. I don't make it just for money. Money is not much. You don't get rich making felt. You barely earn enough to live. I make it because it matters, because it is important. Because a woman will someday put on this hat and feel happy, warmer, protected. And she won't know that another woman, a felt maker, whom she will never see, sat on a train and thought of her while her fingers worked, while the felt came into being." The landscape outside the window was dark now, completely dark. Only white from snow lying quietly on fields, on trees, on roofs. The train passed through small sleeping villages with lights in a few windows, warm light, and she worked on. The wool compressed slowly, became less voluminous, less fluffy, more solid, more substantial. It was not yet finished, not yet perfect, but you could begin to see the transformation, the metamorphosis. Raw wool became something else, something more durable. "I'm 65 now," she said after a while, without looking up. "I've been making felt for 50 years. 50 years. A long time, isn't it? In Teustlingen, in my little shop, so small, tiny almost, with my tables, my tubs, my old tools that are older than my daughter. And every year there are fewer customers, fewer commissions. People want faster things, cheaper things, things from factories. They want felt hats from machines, from factories, not from a person, not made with real handwork, with love. But I cannot do otherwise. I could not. I am a felt maker, not just my profession. No, this is my identity, my essence, what makes me breathe. Without felt, I am empty, I am nothing. I do not know who I am without the felt." I watched her work. Again and again, her fingers moved in a pattern as constant as a breath, like a heartbeat, like the rattle of the train. The train was warm, very warm now, and outside was snow, and everything was dark and still and peaceful. And she worked, and the wool became felt, and time disappeared, and the world disappeared, and worries disappeared, and there was only wool and water and hands and rhythm and love. "The felt," she whispered almost. "The felt is like love. The more you rub, the more you work, the more you have patience, the more you trust, the more beautiful it becomes. It needs no formula, it needs only time and hands and a person who thinks it matters, a person who loves." And my eyes grew very heavy, so heavy, as if wool itself were in them. The rhythm of her hands was like a lullaby, was like an old mother rocking her child. The warmth of the water, the steam rising, was like a soft blanket, like a shawl. And I thought of felt, of women wearing hats and not knowing why they are warm, of hands that work, of love, of patience, of time, of the beauty of slow. The train goes on, and the hands work, and the wool compresses, and felt is born. Warm felt for someone whom we will never meet, but who will know it somewhere in a hat. And I sleep and dream of felt, of warmth, of love, and time. I'm at the Silversmith on the line from the Loch to Delimont, through the lovely Jura, where the mountains are gentle and green, and the forests dark green like the oldest dreams, like the color of deep night with just a bit of light. It was neither winter nor summer, one of those mysterious seasons in between, when time itself is uncertain, when the world doesn't know if it should be warm or cold, when the world hangs between two thoughts. The train traveled through long tunnels and deep valleys, and the light came and went like a breath, bright and dark, rhythmic as music, and the wheels sang their old song beneath us. He sat with a small, delicate workbench before him, scarcely larger than a desk, and on this bench, silver. Silver everywhere. All the gleaming and shine of silver, the light that silver carries with it. Small spoons in various stages of finish and polish, some shining like pure moonlight, some dull like old antique coins, all with different shapes and characters, each with its own story. A silver blank lay before him, barely a form yet, just silver, and he worked with a very fine, delicate hammer and a very precise file, with the whole concentration of a man doing something sacred, something that cannot be undone. I could see how careful he was, how each hammer stroke was calculated, how every scrape of the file was deliberate, with love.
I had to ask. The work was so careful, so incredibly beautiful to watch that I couldn't resist. And he looked at me, briefly only, one glance, and smiled. His smile was like the smile of someone doing exactly the right thing. "Silver," he said quietly. "I make small spoons from silver, very small spoons, not large, not practical, not for daily use. Just silver, beautiful, for those who want to buy beauty, not function, not purpose, just beauty." He showed me a finished spoon, scarcely longer than my index and middle fingers together, shining like moonlight, so fine that light shone through the wall of the spoon, almost translucent, almost like a dream made of metal. "This is sterling silver," he said, and his voice was proud, but not haughty. "This is the purest silver, the finest quality silver there is. The name comes from an old test. If you have sterling silver, 925 parts in 1,000 are pure silver. The rest is copper, perhaps, or other metals, to make it stable, durable. But the beauty, the power, the light, that comes from the true silver, from this noble metal." I asked him how long it takes to make such a fine, beautiful spoon, such a perfect one. And he laughed, not heartily, not loudly, but with great understanding of my question, like someone who shares with you, trusts you with a great old secret. "A long time," he said, and his tone grew serious. "Much longer than you think, much longer than is sensible, much longer than the world wants to pay. This little spoon here, this marvelous little spoon, that took 3 hours, 3 full hours. And that is fast, that is very fast, that is almost hurried, that is almost restless. When I am very careful, when I work in a special design, when I incorporate fine decorations, tiny flowers, names, ornaments, patterns, the wearer's personal story, then it can take days. A single spoon. 3, 4, 5 days or more of concentrated, loving work." "But," he continued, and his eyes grew wider, "I'm not sad about that, not impatient, not tired. Every strike of the hammer is a meditation, a prayer, a conversation with the silver. I am one with the silver. The hammer is only the voice of the silver, the voice of what the silver wants to become. And together we create something that lives 100 years, that is passed from mother to child, to granddaughter, to great-granddaughter perhaps. And every time it is used, every time it is touched, when someone eats something fine with it,
then the silver remembers my hands, my love. He showed me the tools. A large, wonderful array of hammers, all different, all with names, all with stories I don't know. A large hammer, a small hammer, a medium hammer. "This is my grandfather's hammer," he said, and lifted a large, heavy hammer that I could see was old, that had lived many years. "That one struck silver for 80 years. 80 years! And the strikes are still there, in the form of the hammer, in the way the strikes sound. And now I strike with it. I am a generation's strike. In 10 years, perhaps my son strikes with it, if my son wants to learn his craft, if the world still allows it, if the world still has enough time for beauty." We sat for a while in silence and watched the work, the slow transformation of the silver. The tunnel ended, and suddenly there was light again, bright Jura light, falling on the silver and breaking it into 1,000 little rainbows, into 1,000 tiny light rays. And he worked on, not rushed, not slow, just right, exactly right. The right rhythm, the right pressure, the right love, the right intention. "You know," he said, without stopping his work. His hands struck on, ever on. "In the Loch, where I live, there were once 100 silversmiths, maybe more, maybe 150, 100, all working with silver, all making spoons and forks and jewelry and artworks and decoration, all in one village, in one small part of the world. And the whole village smelt of silver and work and love. Now I might be the last, or one of the last, maybe 2, 3 others still. That is all. And my business, it is small, very small, on a side street in Old Loch, a large old house where upstairs my family lives, my wife and my daughter, and downstairs my workshop. I don't earn much, no, hardly enough. My family, my wife, my children, they sometimes think I am mad, that I spend so much time and patience for so little money, that I give days to a spoon, to a work of art. But I could not do otherwise. I do not know how to live any other way. The silver calls me. It calls to me every night, in my dreams, in my thoughts, and I must answer, I must make, I must continue, until I become silver myself, perhaps." I watched as the fine lines of silver gleamed in the light, as the file opened them and polished and shaped them, as the spoon gradually took its form, became a thing, a creation. And slowly, with every minute, my eyes grew heavier, so heavy, as if silver itself were covering them. The rhythm, ta-dum, 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 was like a sleep song, was like an old lullaby, was like the heartbeat of the world itself. And the silver was like a dream, bright and cold and incredibly beautiful. "A spoon," he whispered, and his voice too was now heavy, tired, satisfied. "Is more than a spoon. A spoon is a hand that makes it, a hand that uses it, a hand that touches it perhaps in 100 years. Everything is hand, everything is love. And the silver remembers. It remembers forever." The train went on, and the valleys of the Jura came past, green and sleepy, and the silver shone, and the hammer struck, very quietly, and little spoons were slowly born from silver, from time, from patience, from love. And I slept, deep and calm, like silver, so cold, so beautiful, so warm, in my dreams. In my dreams, I held the spoon to my mouth and tasted not food, but time and love in the hands of a man still working in the Jura, in the light, in the silver. And I was there too.